Hi everyone, this is Dave. I want to, since we're talking about assessment this week, I want to show you a couple things and hopefully explain them as you head into thinking of how you're assessing students. So first off, we're talking about finding ways that we can share with students a hopefully accurate evaluation of where they are in terms of meeting the standards. We're not talking right now, or I'm not talking right now about formative assessment, but about summative assessment, their attempt at meeting the standard. What Knight is calling the guiding questions, or what we're talking about when we say the Common Core, the actual standard. We're not talking about the specific proficiencies, those things students need in order to do the standard. So let me start by showing you one of the links, which is from Robert Marzano. Marzano is an education researcher, big consultant, and he's done a ton of work. His people have done a ton of work in Maine, especially with this group working on what's called mass customized learning, where you have kids working on standards at their own pace, the whole thing. So this is an example of a Marzano scoring scale. And here's how this looks, all right? So the number 3 is where Marzano and his consultants focus their work with teachers. And this is what the standard is, okay? So if you took the Common Core standard for whatever you're working on, let's see if I have one I can pull up. Give me a quick second. Okay, here we go. Let's say narrative writing, 6 through 12. Okay, here's the standard. This is what, that whole thing is what Marzano's people believe is the 3 thing, okay? And this is what you want kids to be able to do. If they do, and this is also what you've taught, okay? You've taught this. If kids go beyond that, if they can make inferences, they can do more than this, it's a level 4. If they can't quite do this, but they understand the basics, they essentially have the specific proficiencies, they just can't do the standard, it's a 2. A number 1, pretty much, it's an attempt, and we're talking it can be a pretty basic attempt. And a 0, they didn't even show up, there's nothing there. Okay, so that's what they look at. Now, you can have the whole question about how do we make this into a 0 to 100 number scale, and I've seen plenty of teachers call the 4 100, this an 85, this 75, 50, and 0. And a whole lot of people are using that as a routine scale, but here's the philosophical question. If this is what you've taught, the standard, and this is what kids are targeting, they're targeting for the standard, then why is this not 100? That's a very good question, and I wrestled with this when I was teaching ELA. And honestly, as a parent as well, I've had the same question with my kids' teachers. They met the standard, why is that not 100? That's what they're supposed to do. And some pretty major people, some pretty influential teachers, people I respect greatly, convinced me that indeed, if you actually had to do numbers, this is 100. That's where I wound up going. Okay, so anyway, this is the Marzano scale, and that link is there. Explore that, ask questions. I want to show you one of my scoring guides, and I'm going to use the editable version. So it's the same, 1, 2, 3, 4. I tried breaking it down to 2.5 and 3.5, and that didn't work. That was just, for me, a way of justifying adding more scoring options. The number 3, this is the standard. This is the narrative writing standard, and I don't believe there's, oh, okay, I'm sorry. I messed up when I did this. I added stuff that was not in the standard, okay? So that was one first thing. Sorry about that. That was one first thing I learned in doing this, was that if I was teaching the standard and I was truly running a standards-based program, I could not start adding things that were not in the standard. Okay? Marzano's consultants came and they looked at my scoring guide and they said, and actually this should say narrative writing, not multimedia. They looked at my scoring guide and they said, well, this is good, you've done it, you've done it right, but this is so much stuff. How can a kid ever, look at their work, look at all this stuff, and actually be able to do it? And here's what they suggested. Get rid of all this and put in the actual basic wording from the standard. Their reasoning was that, and I think this is valid reasoning, their reasoning was that if indeed you have taught this standard, and they believe in explicit teaching, if I have taught this standard, kids should know what this means, and being able to do this means they can actually do all the stuff I initially listed. Okay? So they were saying putting all this in, which is right from here, okay, right from the standard, putting all these A through E in was just confusing the picture. And that what I should be doing is skipping all that, putting this in, because here's what I have taught. Okay? The number two, when you mix Jim Knight into this equation, the number two is really, these are the specific proficiencies. So I look at the standard. I can't type tonight, sorry. I'm doing this in a hotel room. So you look at the standard and you figure out what skills do I have to teach for students to be able to do this, and that's what is in the number two. So let's say they can't actually fully write this piece of writing. They just can't do it. They should know the specific proficiencies I've taught. It should be being able to use dialogue. Let's pull them up here, right? You being able to write dialogue. Basic skills in writing descriptively. Being able to sequence events. Wording phrases. Being able to write a conclusion. Being able to engage a reader. Okay? Understanding points of view. So it's actually quite a few things I have to teach for students to be able to do this. Well, a two is, they can either do the specific proficiencies or they can do reasonably well at them. They have basic skill at them. But they can't do them to the point that they can do this all holistically together. Okay? A number four was they can go beyond this standard. As a writing teacher, we often saw a number four, and we had department conversations about this. Okay, that's where working with colleagues comes in. And we kind of agreed that while, we certainly don't expect to see a student piece of writing without any errors, a number four piece of writing could get published pretty with minimal editing. Whether it was for a student magazine, a newspaper op-ed piece, or something like that. Or it could be a model, like a department model for this level. And we dropped the 0. A 1 was essentially, they were there was a mark on a paper, or there was some attempt. But it didn't really matter if we were like giving out, like, oh, you're giving partial credit for something that's not very good at all. Like, it didn't really matter. It was an attempt on the standard. Okay? So that's, summative assessment using a Marzano style scoring guide or rubric. I've put up a link to the Alfie Kohn article as, definitely a contradictory view. I think plenty of people would agree with him. Plenty would disagree. I think my students found it helpful to see what the standard was and what success meant. I then, when I gave feedback, my comment box was bigger. I could then, give pretty extensive comments here, the back of the page. I wound up giving most of my comments in the end in audio. I made a simple SoundCloud recording of my comments as I walk students through a piece of writing, much like I'm doing with you folks. They could open their writing, listen to my voice, and I could talk, and they just had to follow along. I could talk about things with them. So this week, think about how you're going to formatively assess your students, and as well, how does assessment look in this redesigned learning system you're building. Questions, pop them in the forum. Let's have some conversation, and have a good week. Thanks.